Thank you all for being here in person. Thank you all for joining us online. I really appreciate that this matters to you. We have an incredible attendance, not only in person, but online as well. We're smashing last year's record, if there is such a thing. So that shows increased engagement, which is what we really want to have at UWM. So things are working. I'm happy about that. And I appreciate you. And some of you had to travel very far to be here. So I appreciate you for doing that. So we recognize that. Okay, well, annual summit, here we are. So much is going on here at UWM, and we're so excited to be sharing a lot of that with you. And some of this we're trying to make fold into our annual conference coming up this summer. So we're trying to string our events more together so that themes translate from one to the other, and we grow together as we learn the different aspects of things that we'll present here at Summit. And then we'll go deeper dive into our even our tech conference, into our annual convention, and so on and so forth. So we can make sort of a growth process that we all do together on this journey. So I didn't know it, but I'm actually very excited about UD history. Any other form of history, really don't care all that much. Please don't ask me anything about our history in this world or our country, because I don't know. But Unity history, I found I'm very excited about. I love diving into our Unity history. And so today I want to start off by talking about the history of the Association of Unity Churches, which later was renamed Unity Worldwide Ministries, the organization that we are celebrating today. A new understanding of an old story. How did the Association of Unity Churches come about? I bet everyone in this room probably has a slightly different interpretation of what that story is. My father, being a Unity minister, raised me with one interpretation of that story, which I have come to find is not actually accurate interpretation either. So all of us probably have some version of the story, some of them closer to what actually happened, some of them pretty far away from what actually happened. But what I have found is through time, there's been this sort of whispering and murmuring about how this came about and who did what to who and all the stuff, that the drama that was unfolding at that time that unfolded later on in the conflict. And I don't think that this is healthy for us to continue this story, to continue this, this pain. I really consider it a pain in our organization and between our organizations to keep telling this story. So there are many versions of the story pertaining to how the association branched off from Unity School, what it was called at the time. And many of these are steeped in juicy details and drama and conflict and there's so much fun to tell because there's all this conflict we can add and flavor the story with. And it seems to get more and more exciting each time it's told, and probably further and further away from what actually happened. These stories have created a shadow, not only in the Association of Unity Churches, but I think also in between how we associate with Unity Worldwide Ministries. And it's been around the movement for far too long. So our goal for this presentation today and right now is one, to discern what actually happened, going through the history books to see what actually happened and when it happened. I think it's important knowing the timeline of when things happened so we understand how things were unfolding. Also, how it happened, what actually happened at the time, and then why? Why did it happen that way? Well, these are the questions that were on my mind because I just wanted to clear this up once and for all. So we just write the history books and we all just tell the same story going forward, and we have a nice kumbaya moment. So there was a lot of research involved in this process through board minutes from around the time these things were happening, actually going back to those board minutes, reading the books on our history to see how people were logging what was happening at that time, and then talking to people that had some connection to that. All right. Ultimately, it is time to bring closure to the story and move forward. Do you all agree? I think so. Am I just totally off track, or have you all heard different stories that you think it's time to bring closure to it? Okay,
heard a lot of
some nodding
stories.
heads, so I'm not just totally out in left field wasting everyone's time. Okay, good. All right, so let's talk about some dates. We're going to talk about some dates between 1889 and 2019. So we're going to cover some ground here. We're not going to talk about every single year, so just calm down. This is not the entire annual summit, just going year by year what happened. We're going to hit some key points. All right, 1889. This is the key year we often talk about in Unity. This is when things really kicked off, right? The Fillmores were really starting to clarify what they were doing. They were starting to print and publish their thoughts and send them out around the world. So this was the seed of when things began for Unity, really started to solidify. What I'd like to point out is at that same time, the seed of Unity Worldwide Ministries was born at that same year, at that same time. We have Myrtle, who started looking to gather people together to teach and study this work. And that, as I see it, really is the foundation of what Unity Worldwide Ministries is the aspect of Unity is bringing those people together to study and learn this work. So that seed was planted that same year when we see all the other aspects of Unity coming about. So we moved to 1903. Unity Society of Practical Christianity is incorporated. So this is the first formal organization that came together to start doing this work. And in the bylaws of that incorporation, it says the right to license properly qualified persons to perform all the privileges of a minister of the gospel. We recognize that is also what we do in Unity Worldwide Ministries. So very early on, we're recognizing the seeds of Unity Worldwide Ministries coming to light, being born. I'm pointing some of this out because growing up in Unity, I personally felt that sometimes Unity UWM was sort of the forgotten child, the one that said, well, no one really intended that to happen. It just came about. It wasn't supposed to be there. Fillmores didn't want it to happen. I just want to show this was very much a seed of what was happening to that whole time. 1914, incorporation of Unity School of Christianity, which later became Unity World Headquarters. So now we have the formalized organization for all of Unity with the Fillmores involved. Then we get the field department established. So we're starting to have centers and ministries and groups popping up in different places. These study groups are coming out from nowhere, just getting Unity material. They're starting to come together. It's starting to get formalized, and they create a department to work with these field groups, these ministries, these centers, these churches, whatever any individual was calling them at that time. So this is 1915. This is very early on. This process is happening. So we move on to our next year, 1925. The Unity Annual Conference is formed. Later, they changed that name in 1946 to the Unity Ministers Association. So now we have ministers coming together and seeing that they need to be served. They need to have a community. There's enough of them there that they need to support each other. They also need to have a voice in the larger Unity movement. So they have come together. 1933, ministerial training begins. So now we're formerly, I did this yesterday in practice. Formally. Thank you. I'm not perfect. We know that. There's no shame there. Formally start training leaders for these organizations that are sprouting up out there, right? And that's part of the schools that we have today that UWM works with, credentials, ordains, and has that process. 1964, so now we jump forward in time. The Field Department Study Committee. So this is the Field Department has a subgroup in the Field Department is a study committee, all right? So they come together and they put together a report that they send to the board of the Unity School. So they've come together, do some research. We do this all the time in Unity. We know how this goes. And they send a report to the board of Unity School. And this is what they came to. This is what the report said. We recommend that Unity School, through its field department, build a new image that more adequately communicates its sincere feelings of interest in, respect for, and appreciation of leaders and Unity centers in the field. We agree that the field department is not, or at least no longer can be, simply a department at Unity School. It is an activity that is closely involved with every Unity group, center, or church in the field. It is our purpose in these considerations to help to expand its vision, to update its programs, and to implement its effective outreach. It was also agreed that in the future, it seems logical that UMA, Unity Ministers Association, now that's the other group of ministers that got together, the UMA department become part of the new structure of the field department as an integral department. So they've put this formal letter up to the board and they say, we think we should get with this other group. We should come together. We should be a thing, right? We need its own thing to happen here because these ministries are getting too big. They have too many things they require. There's a lot going on. We feel we need our own thing going on. So that was 1964. 1965, Unity School Bulletin number 4 from Charles R. Fillmore, Executive Vice President of Unity School. So we could say this is somewhat of a response to that request, the formal response from the board to that request. And here's what is said. Each year, the Field Ministry Department has demonstrated its growing capacity to assume increased responsibility for the administration of its own affairs. The Unity Ministers Association itself consistently has taken effective steps in this direction through the expansion of its executive board and the assuming of a number of administrative functions. During the growth of the Field Ministry Department, the Unity School has, wholly or in part, performed many functions which by their very nature can be handled more efficiently by the field itself. So they're acknowledging, yes, we do see that this might be a good direction to go in. You might be able to do this better on your own. These functions include licensing ministers and teachers, ordaining ministers, placing ministers, obtaining, keeping personal and center records, matters of field discipline and ethics, administering the Sunday School and Youth of Unity International activities, and many others. The field ministry now has both the capacity and the need to take over the administrative functions. So there's an acknowledgement, yes, and in fact, we agree. You do need to be your own thing. You need to take on these responsibilities that we formerly had under the larger umbrella and move forward. 1966, Unity Ministers Association and the Field Ministry Department branch off to form the Association of Unity Churches Incorporated. Here we are. Moving forward to 2010. So things are moving along, everything's swell. Association of Unity Churches, Inc. adopts the new Unity branding and establishes the DBA name Unity Worldwide Ministries, which I assume was the same time that Unity World Headquarters adopted their new DBA as well. We jump to 2019, Unity World Headquarters and Unity Worldwide Ministries jointly create the Support Service, Inc. Now, many people don't know that we actually have a third organization that works with the two organizations to run the Unity movement. Some heads went to the side. It was jointly created by both of us out of a need that we saw. In the charter for this organization, it says, whereas while the corporation intends to engage in many support activities for the school and the association in the future, its initial activity will be the ownership and use of certain domain names, trademarks, and branding materials. So clearly we have joint things that each of us has to touch and work on together. So as saw fit at that time to create this third organization that would hold those assets so that each of us had access to them and the centered organization would handle the management of those. You following me? Okay. Good, good, good. 2019. So some of us, 2010, sorry. Some of us are visual learners. So I thought it might help if I did this through a visual demonstration of how this all unfolded. So here we have Unity School Christianity, which would later become Unity World Headquarters. Offshoots of those was Unity Ministers Association and the Field Department. Those two came together to become the Association of Unity Churches, which would later be renamed to Unity Worldwide Ministries. And then the third organization was created to hold the joint assets, joint projects that they're working on, called the Support Service, Inc. Did that help the visual learners? Okay, good. I like to try to reach everybody. All right, now we go to 2019. As I was doing some research on this, I came upon some Reverend Mark Hicks' commentary on this whole process and what he thought. I thought he did a very good job of summarizing and putting some flavor to what he saw happening. So I want to share this. So in 1966, Charles R. Fillmore, grandson of the founders and president of Unity School, issued Directive 4, which we know as Bulletin 4, which severed Unity's organizational control of the field ministries. He did this because he sincerely believed that the field ministries would be better off forming their own organization and managing their own affairs. It just may be that Charles R. Fillmore perceived that Unity School's declaration about the true Church of Christ being not physical, but spiritual, was inhibiting the ability of the field ministries to attract people into their physical centers and churches. If so, then we need to recognize the insight of Charles R. Fillmore. He perceived that the best interest of one unity was multiple independent organizations, what I call institutional pluralism. and he did not let his ambitions prevent him from doing the right thing for the ministers in the unity movement. So I really like his take on that we've talked about this concept of one unity for a long time, and Mark's representing or recognizing there that really the best effort towards one unity is multiple independent organizations, not one organization. And that Charles R. really had a beautiful insight that this was the best direction and healthiest direction for us to go in. Not that there was a battle, not this was a mistake, not that someone kicked somebody out, but that this was the healthiest direction for us to go in. Doesn't that feel better than some of the stories we've heard over time? And these are the actual documented things that happened. I'm sure now some people online, maybe in the room, are saying, well, that's not the story I know. I was there, so-and-so was there. They told me X, Y, Z, and this and that, and the other thing happened. That's fine. There are probably 1,000 different perceptions of what happened. But I think it'd be healthiest for all to get together and say, the intent, the overall movement that happened was for the health and benefit of both organizations. How do we feel about that? Okay. All right, now let's get to something that bubbled up at convention. And that is, how many ministries do we have? This seems to be a moving target over time and really hard to put your finger on. So again, I heard this coming up at convention. I heard a lot of different numbers being quoted, how many ministries we had, how many ministries we've lost, how many ministries we have now. And it was so varied, it just didn't feel on point with what I had been seeing. So again, we decided to do a deep dive into our data, into our CRM data, into our historical data. We even reached out to the archives. We pulled up our past, what we called our yearbooks, which had our previous numbers posted in them. We compiled all of this to try to come to a conclusion finally for how many ministries have we had and how many ministries do we currently have. Are we excited about this? Do you think this is valuable? Okay. Good. I'm not wasting anybody's time yet, but I will soon. All right. So did we ever have 1,000 plus ministries worldwide? Good question. Did we lose 400 ministries in the last 22 years? I have heard that repeated many, many different times. That would be important to know. Did we lose 400 ministries? Is anyone keeping accurate data? Well, the answers are no, we never had more than 1,000 ministries. No, we did not lose 400 ministries in the last 22 years. And we are working on starting to create some accurate data. So those are the answers to that. So we try to get to the bottom of where did the inaccurate data come from? And this is, and some of it is from all the various books on unity. They're quoting all sorts of things, but some of the sources that people kept coming back to us with was saying, Neil Vall's book has these numbers in it. And this is not his fault because he got his numbers from the Association of Unity Churches. So it still comes back to us. But I want to get back to some of the sources of where these numbers came from. So on page 333, in the program of the 4th Annual Convention in October 1926 stated, this is Neil Vall speaking, he's quoting them at that convention, Unity has 1,700 centers or branch schools or study classes. So there's a number throwing out in 1926 that there was 1,700. Well, even Neil Vall acknowledges, and we acknowledge, the way they came to that number is they grouped in any New Thought organization whatsoever. Even if it was a hot dog cart that had Unity on the side of it, they were throwing that into the count. Anything they could get into that count, that's how they came up with 1,700. So it wasn't even just Unity, it was just anything that was remote. So these were study groups, these were churches, these were anything. To come up with that number is 1,700. So that was not an accurate number of how many ministries we had in Unity. But later in the book, page 351, he says, the association has grown and developed in the 3+ decades of existence. The number of ministries increased from 213 in 1966 to over 1,000 by December 1999. There's that number, 1,000. Again, he got these numbers from us, so this is not on him. Well, let's look at what's going on here. Have any of you seen this chart before? I've noticed that this chart's been passed around quite a bit throughout the movement as the chart to say this is what's going on. So we have this chart, which is actually pretty accurate. what our ministries are. What I found out is the assumed trajectory is that it kept going up from that point in time. So if you follow that trajectory, it gets to about 650. Of course, it just continued in that direction. But the reality of this chart is it flatlined right there and never went beyond that point, really. You might want to call that a glass ceiling. We hit this glass ceiling around that point and just one side. So let's really get into the data here. Again, this data is also from the Association of Union Churches. It just says right across the bottom. So these are the actual data points, and we pulled them from 1990. I want to just get the most recent history. We had some sort of better record keeping going on, 1990 of our ministries. The top line you see there are our domestic ministries, and we have 0 to 700 as a scale. The green line is our international ministries. We have the red line is our international groups. So these are just small groups. And the yellow line is our domestic groups. So we see that we were just below 600 in the 90s. We went through this whole stage and then we kind of flatlined right around 2002, staying at about 650 for domestic ministries. International, same thing. We're just over 100 and it sort of flatlines in 2005 around 130 or so. Groups, not doing much of anything. They're just sort of floundering around there, around 30 to 50 groups out there. And then 2009, we have absolutely no data on groups. We stopped collecting data on groups. So that's not that they all vanished. It's just that we have no data there. So we go a little bit, I want to point something out. This is what I call the period of data weirdness. If you're trying to figure out how we gained and lost ministries so rapidly in that time frame, my feeling is that we just counted ministries differently at that time. Sometimes we were counting groups as a ministry. Sometimes we were not counting them as a ministry. It might have just been whoever called the home office and got someone else on the phone who said how many ministries they have. And they're like, nah, it's 650. And they called someone else like, I don't know, 600. So this is a period of data weirdness. And then again, in 2009, we have no data on the groups. So it's just, that data sort of went away, 2008. So going back to our beginnings, so this is our total ministries. This is international and domestic put together, total ministries from 1935 all the way up to 22. So you can see this sort of smooth curve going up, and then we flatlined, and we're at about 770 ministries consistently, adding those two together, international and domestic. And again, we have this period of data weirdness. So if you're tracking that and trying to figure out what happened, just average that out and ignore the peaks and valleys. There was not this crazy increase and decrease in ministries going on, just different counting. So where do we actually sit today? As we count it today, we have 637 domestic ministries. As we count our international ministries, we have 140. We are at approximately 7 domestic groups, and we are approximately 2 international groups. We say approximately because we're only now trying to get the data on that. It's been so long since they've been contacted and figured out if they still exist. That means we're on the internet, checking if they have a website, trying to call the individuals, see if they still exist. So this is the count we have so far, but our ministerial development team is ongoing with this effort to reach out to the groups that we thought might be in existence and checking if they're still there. So my hope is that we now use this data going forward. Whenever we do a workshop, whenever we quote something, when you reach out to us, we're going to give you this data. We're going to try to be consistent on always pulling from this data going forward. And we're going to update this data every year according to how we've gotten the information to this point. Would that be helpful? Would it be good if we're all looking at the same data? I think so. All right. Any questions? So we'll take about a couple questions and we're going to do some breakout groups so you can discuss what you've seen thus far. So we'll take 2 questions either in the room or online. Does anyone have a question? The question was, will there be a published list of ministries every year? Yeah, I think we can do that. It's really just spitting out a report out of Neon of the current ministries we have. There's also the online directory. The countries and the international ministries. Diana, go. Claudia, go. Canada. I'll repeat it. Canada, Nigeria, Australia, England, Mexico, Puerto Rico, Dominican Republic, Colombia, South Africa, New Zealand, Philippines, Germany, yes,
Jamaica.
Australia, New Zealand, in case I didn't already say that. So to help us, if you know of ministries that have closed, or ministries that have opened, or ministries abroad that we may or may not have been known about, we only know about what people tell us about and we can verify. So if you have information, please let us know. Or if you want to check to see if we know about a ministry either opening, closing, or still existing, just contact us and we'll verify that. We can update our records. We want to be accurate, but we can only be as accurate as the information we have. All right? So we have Republic of South Africa and Ghana as well.
Does domestic include alternative ministries?
Yes, these are all ministries regardless of type. One more question, and then we'll go to groups. Okay.
Question is, earlier on you mentioned about the service organization that's been formed between UWM and UWH. And you mentioned that that organization holds the assets. Does that mean the financial assets as well?
No. Assets I was referring to was our trademark and our branding. So we have the joint Unity trademark and the joint Unity branding. Those are the assets. Is there anything else, Jim, that holds it? The unity.org URL as well. So the question is, of all the international ministries, do they all have their own association in their country? And then within that association, their own ministries? So the count we have is of all ministries, regardless of association. So again, if there are ministries out there that we're not counting, we don't know about, make sure we've talked about. We talk to the associations in each country though, and they are reporting back to us, ones that they know and they are open. Does every single country have its own association? No, they do not. And if they don't, they probably work directly with us on anything they need. So she was just asking a clarifying question that, do we in fact include all the ministries regardless of where they are associated? Yes, so even if they're associated with a different, their own association, their own country, we are counting that ministry as part of the total because we work with those associations. So the commentary from the gallery here is that they didn't like, I'm always going to use the wrong term. That's just, if I'm going off the cuff, I'm going to use the wrong term. So I said flatline. That's not what I meant. Actually, I was trying to say glass ceiling. There is something unseen that stopped us from growing that we needed to discern, and knowing the data and the timeline, what happened will help us to discern what that was. So the theory here is that the theology spread into the general. I disagree with that personally. I feel like that could be an excuse we use not to address the things that actually happened. But we could talk about, there's a whole workshop on that I could travel and present to you if you'd like. Okay,